Our guest for today's episode is Jeremy Stokes. He is graduating from BCU Brand Center in Experience Design. He has interned at Google Seattle as a UX design intern and has worked on projects involving mental health, augmented reality, and virtual reality. I am Mayank Khandelwal, and you are listening to Whiteboard.fm. Hey Jeremy, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Nice man. So Jeremy, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, my name is Jeremy Stokes. Let's see. I guess to introduce myself, three things I sort of believe in. I believe that I single-handedly created my brothers. I believe that cartoons are the sort of greatest inspiration source, and I also believe that my beard is the most mystical thing in the world. Those are the three things that sort of start to tell people a little bit about myself and a little bit about how I sort of like view the world and all of these mannerisms and whatnot.
Right, nice. So Jeremy, why don't you tell us a story about how did you get into design?
Yeah, I really sort of fell into design. Um, I had always sort of been interested in building and making things. Like art class was my favorite, but I didn't follow that sort of career path. I thought I was going to be a doctor. So when I started undergrad, I did a biology degree is what I started off in. And then around my sophomore year, I realized that I was bored with it. I felt like I had learned everything there was to like learn in biology. And I was like, I needed something else to like stimulate my mind. And one day I was actually browsing the internet, and you know how like the sites crash and you get like a HTML, like basically without the CSS. And I said, this is cool. I don't know what this is, but I would like to learn more about it. And so I spent the day sort of, I guess, starting to teach myself HTML and all that stuff. Then I decided to switch my major into IT,
Right.
and that's what got me interested in web development from there. And that sort of sparked my design curiosity because I didn't really like the coding part of it all, but I did like the more like figuring out how people would navigate the site and just like visuals and graphics. So that was one part of it. Like I would say my more technical expertise came from that. And the more a love and appreciation for like crafting experience from people came from also in undergrad. I was a campus event planner. So I planned like all the events that went on. It's like fashion shows, concerts, you name it. And that was, I think, one of my most fulfilling moments of my life. Just getting to put on all these amazing things and, you know, seeing people smile and laugh. And still like to this day, I hear people will hit me up and they'll be like, oh, do you remember when you did such and such? I'm like, yeah. And it's like, oh, that was so dope. It's just that moment or those moments where I get some of my fondest, and they made me see design in this sort of different way that I don't think I had ever seen before.
Yeah.
So combining those two things is how I sort of ended up on experience design because I get to live out my passion of like being a tech nerd and like learning all this like cool technical stuff. But then I also get to really find those sort of raw moments where you get people and humans involved, um, and you really get to create things that you know matter to them. And I think design was the best way to have both of those influences very prevalent in really everything that I do.
Right. That's great, man. So also, like since you do web development as well, but you do product design, I guess professionally. So, to what extent did you decide to learn web development? Like, when did you realize that okay, this is enough web development I've learned, and now which I can use as my skill or in my projects, and now I can focus more on design.
Yeah, for my web development skills, it wasn't like a natural like stop. Like it wasn't like I was like, great, I've learned enough. Let's move on to something else. It was I saw that I didn't get as much enjoyment out of actually coding the sites and doing that part of it more than I more than I found that I got enjoyment out of thinking through the process of what would be on the sites and how they would present themselves, and how they would work, how they would flow, what would the micro interactions be, and stuff like that. I just saw my enjoyment was on that part of it, more of the front end stuff, than on the back end part. But learning that actually helps me be a better partner when it comes to like development, because I'm able to speak to them, I guess, in their language, or I'm able to like break it down in a way that can be understood amongst like design and
Right.
development, because I have that sort of background. So it definitely helps me be a better partner. And I continue to sort of like learn and practice and uh, hone in on those skills, just not as much. It'll be something like I do like every couple of months. Like, all right, let's do a refresh and make sure that you can still do this, that you still understand and like see what's new and what's going on.
Right. Makes sense. Also, Jeremy, can you tell us more about what your first project was like? How did you get your first professional project? Like, what work did you do beforehand, before that, to be able to gain that credibility? And also,
we
once you
talk,
got it, how did you go about it?
are we talking first professional project,
Doesn't need to be in a
like
company, can be freelance as well.
first professional company ever?
Yeah,
Like,
either first job at a professional company ever, or like first freelance project ever.
okay. My first freelance project ever was I was working for a startup in Northern Virginia, um, and they needed a site for their like startup venture and all that stuff. So that was my first ever. I'm pretty sure I was like a junior in college, uh, and that was my first ever like time doing anything like that. So I was like new to it all and didn't know what exactly was going on.
Like,
Um, but it was just basically they wanted to have a site for their new startup. And so I think I interviewed on like a Friday, and then I started that like Tuesday, and built the site, showed it to them in like a week, and they like loved it enough that they hired me on full time to do their actual site too. So then I got to redesign. I got to redesign the actual site homepage and
like,
do all the fixings, like develop it and code it. And that's sort of what allowed me to see more that I don't really like this coding stuff as much as I thought I did. Um, and I realized like I enjoy way more the design part of it all and like the thinking through it.
like,
Um, and that's what sparked me to realize that if I were to pursue a career in web development, I wouldn't be happy, and I needed to find something that could please that sort of passion to just like create. Uh, and so instead of like teaching myself what I thought I needed to learn, I actually applied to grad school, and I ended up going to it's called the VCU Brand Center, and the track I'm in is called Experience Design. And that track, before going in, I saw that it combined both of the things that I wanted to learn. So like the more technical side of design and also the physical aspect of it, was such a broad topic as experience design. There's so much different
yeah,
avenues you can get into with that. And I like the sort of freeness that the program had. So I said, great, this is the way you're going to be able to actually, figure out if this hunch that you have that design is what you want to do is, the right thing. So I went on in, got in, and I started 2 years ago. And so I'm about to end up my degree like next week, actually.
nice. So Jeremy, so exactly like you said, it started off with the interview, right? So how did you get the interview in terms of, or did you approach to the client? or to the prospective client or with some work beforehand? And if you showed some work beforehand to land up with the interview, like what was the pitch? How did you approach?
hmm This was actually before I even understood anything about like portfolios or building a book or anything like that. This was maybe like 3.5 years ago when I did this. And basically, I just went into the office and just started talking and like talked about, what my passions were, what I was interested in doing, showed them. I think I had just built my first portfolio site. So I showed them that and I walked them through like how I made it. And they had like a little animation of me like, excuse me, moving in a astronaut suit up and down. Real like scrappy. Um, but I showed them that and he was just like blown away. And so it was really just more like talking. I definitely think like talking and relating to him and actually figuring out gathering what they needed
Right,
um, from the jump definitely like helped me navigate that conversation. Because, like I said, this is my first time ever doing any sort of like web development for someone that wasn't myself. So I think just by talking and like learning about their company through the interview, I was able to sort of field my questions in certain ways to basically do like a
it was more like showing, letting the client know what you have in mind of how you can improve their product or or like their design and add value to it. And once they are
yeah,
convinced, they are like they're on board. That yeah, why not?
yeah, basically it was just asking like a bunch of questions almost as if I was doing a like user interview and
Right,
just figuring out what their sort of pain points were with their site now and what they wanted to do in the future and like speaking to that through like my one or two examples that I had. So I was really just like throwing everything I had in to get this opportunity, but it ended up working out and I had a great, I think I stayed there for like a little bit over a year and a half.
yeah,
I stayed there right before I got another internship, but it was just that was great. And I think that definitely instilled in me just the need to like understand when coming to interviews, like you're not only getting interviewed, but you're interviewing them too. And it showed me that, the most important part is asking the right questions and
correct,
sort of like leading them down the path of imagination.
right,
So you can better express to them, what you can deliver on your end to them as well.
absolutely. So Jeremy, can you tell us more about how did you apply to Google and what is the process?
Yeah. When I started grad school, I made it a goal. I said, well, before I started grad school, I made it a goal. I said, okay, I'm going to apply to grad school and get in. Applied to grad school, got in. And then once I got in, I said, great, I'm going to apply to an internship at one of the big tech companies and I'm going to get in. Um, and I set that goal beforehand, just for like passively, like I wasn't thinking like too seriously about it. But I thought that in having that sort of goal, it would be something like good to work toward and sort of being more intentional about the work I wanted to do and holding myself more accountable. So I actually never planned on applying to it. I just wanted that is like one of my stretch goals to be. So when I was working on my portfolio site, maybe in December of 2019, I said, why not just apply to it and see what happens? And so I applied it in January and got the email a couple of weeks after that with the design exercise. And I was like, oh, this is like real. Like it's not just like for fake now. Like, let's see what you can do. And the exercise, I was super pumped about the exercise because it related to like student affairs and academics. And
What
that
was
was
the
what I
exercise?
had. You said what?
What was the exercise?
The I don't remember exactly, but I know it was something about new student admittance and orientation or something like that. But it was definitely a space I had sort of worked in undergrad, and I enjoyed like orienting students. I think is one of the most important things to do is also one of the most important parts of your college experience. It sort of makes or break
Right.
the rest of your 4 years there. So for me, it's like super important. And having worked in that space previously, I knew the importance of it. So I was super pumped about getting to like dream big about, okay, how can Google sort of influence this very like intimate but monumental moment in a lot of people's lives. And I just got to work like immediately, calling old associates I used to work with, like other friends I had known that was in college, siblings that were going to college, friends and family. I just like getting as much information as I could. And that's usually how I approach every single problem that I have. I go to like this phase where I just gather so much information that my brain is about to bust. Um, and so I worked on that for the upcoming week. Had a lot of sleepless nights and then submitted it. Didn't hear anything back for maybe like a week or two. Not a week or two, maybe like a month or some change. And then got an email that I had a follow up interview. Um, there was more like assessing whether I knew UX stuff or not. But it was super chill because I think the way that I approach any interview is that, like I said before, it's an interview on both sides. So I'm not only getting interviewed, but I'm interviewing them as well.
Right.
And I think having that mindset helps me turn things into more of a conversation
Yeah.
and not just as a quiz or a test. Like here's your question. You have A, B, or C to pick from, but more like here's your question. Here's how I answered it. Here's a question back, and sort of have this ping pong uh, aspect to it that I find helps me just like have more genuine
It helps
conversations
to
with
calm your
people.
nerves as well. I feel a lot of us feel very nervous before going into an interview, but this is a great way of
Mhm.
thinking that an interview is both sides, and that
Yeah,
it's not that just the interviewer who needs to ask the questions and know about the candidate. The candidate needs to know more, can also ask more about the company and the job by interviewing the interviewer.
right. I think if you're sort of approaching it as like I'm getting interviewed here, and not asking like those questions, it can make you more nervous because you feel like you're not answering it right or wrong or things like that. But if you approach this is a conversation with a company that I love or somebody that could be my friend, I think that mindset is a lot easier, at least for me, to just be more natural and be more myself. And so I'm not as like stuck up there.
Makes
I
sense.
Yeah, like anytime before an interview, I tell myself like I treat it as like a first date. Like this is a first date, and like what are some things that I would do before a first date, or it's like some questions I would ask, and that sort of helps me quell my nerves for the sense and not be so like stuck up and robotic with the way that I'm answering questions. But
Exactly.
following up that, maybe I didn't hear anything for like a month. So now we're in March, and I went on vacation to Cancun actually. So I was chilling in Mexico, like living a different version of my life. And I got a call from my recruiter, like, hey, we have some people that, want to do a team matching interview with you. And I said, great, I'm on vacation. Can I like do it when I come back? And she said, no, I think you should like take it now, if you have the chance. And like time zones are all different. Like the Wi-Fi in Mexico is like spotty, and like the Wi-Fi at our hotel is spotty. And like I'm the only one that has like phone service down there out of my friend group. So I'm like, well, I can't like leave them because then they won't know how to contact. So it was a whole mess. And I was like, okay, but I have to do this. And it actually worked in my favor, I think. I think it calmed me down a lot because I was interviewing like poolside as I was like walking through like the team match portion of it all. But after that, I found out maybe like a couple of hours later that I got the offer to join both of the teams. I had to select which team I wanted to be on more, and that actually took like a couple of days to think about because because it was more than just like geographic preference. So like one was on the East Coast, one was on the West Coast, and I'm from the East Coast, so I said, okay, I think I want to go to the West Coast for a little bit. but it was more like on the project level and team level. I like the one that I ended up doing a lot more, and I felt like I was more passionate about it because that. So last summer I got to work with the Google Duo team and their Google's dedicated video calling app. And the reason that that one resonated with me more was because I grew up in a military family, and I'm so used to like having relatives that are just like far away,
Right.
and I like have a very sort of like soft spot for like video calling and stuff like that because it does have a way of connecting people, and giving you a chance to connect. And I was like, great, that's a different problem space I haven't worked with, and I think it would be interesting to sort of like tackle that and see what those challenges were. So I picked that and went running forward for the rest of the summer working with them out in Seattle, and it was a really great experience.
Nice. Also, before we start with you sharing your case study and your project at Google, one thing you mentioned was that you were not you were like you would get a response almost a month after every round, right? So how did you deal with that period? If you ever felt anxious or like nervous of whether you got selected or not, or like what was going on?
So you're saying how did I deal with the feeling of being nervous about if I
When
didn't get?
No, no not about if I didn't get in, but the fact that I haven't gotten a response yet. Like it's already been a month. Like what's going on?
Oh, honestly, I didn't think too much about it. I
Nice.
thought it was all pretty normal
Yeah.
to not hear anything back. I think I went in it with the expectation that it's gonna take time and the process is gonna be a little slow.
I think a lot of
Uh,
need to be patient about that because a big set of people do feel that way that what's going on? Did I get in or not? Or like am I selected
mhm.
for the next round? But then a lot of it is built on expectations and also just general nervousness.
Yeah, and I also think it goes back to just asking questions. Like in the emails that I don't know. I think sometimes we all tend to think that you can't ask the recruiter a lot of questions, or you don't want to ask too much questions. You don't want to seem needy. But I always ask too many questions, I think. And what it does is it helps my mind sort of sit at ease if I have like my holes filled.
Right.
Uh, and so there isn't anything that I don't necessarily know. So when I first got the email from the recruiter, I was like, great, do you have a timeline for like how long this usually takes? Like, is there, anything I should know beforehand? Should I prepare, stuff? And sort of asking those questions gave me a at least sort of like roadmap for what I could be doing during this time. Um, and I think also having distractions was good too. So I was wrapping up my second semester in grad school, so I had projects to do. Um, and that semester was a little bit lighter than our first one. So I
Yeah.
also had like extracurricular projects I was doing outside of that that sort of filled my free time. So I didn't have time to really think about what was happening with the application until I got the alert. So it just kind of happened that I wasn't ever sort of in a panic that something was about to happen or something wasn't happening when it should. I just sort of trusted the process.
I think
And
also a big part of it is, like you said, just shooting your shot and asking the questions that you feel
mhm,
will at least bring more clarity and peace to your mind.
mhm.
So once that's done, you automatically feel a general calm.
Yeah, like just asking the questions. Like the only thing they can do is not respond. And if they don't respond, wait 2 weeks and ask again. Uh yeah, I'm a big proponent for asking the questions. And no one's ever gonna be mad that you ask too many questions. You're just gonna be mad that you didn't ask enough
Yeah,
when the time comes.
great man. So Jeremy, why don't you can you show us can you tell us more about your project at Google and also how did you work about it?
Yeah, so I can't share too much about the project that I
Right.
worked on at Google. A lot of it is very much under wraps, but I can share sort of what I learned from it, and also the sort of like type of things I thought were valuable that I took away from the whole internship experience, if that's cool.
Sure, sure. We can do that.
All right. I don't necessarily think I need to show any screens for this.
You can
We can
share
really.
your case study though, what you've written on Medium or on your portfolio website.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Are you seeing my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is actually a feature shot of me and my manager. He was not too happy with me that day. I think I was whiteboarding something didn't make any sense to him. So he recorded this video. But shout out to him for supporting me, but also showing me when I was doing wrong. So essentially, during this internship, I interned as a user experience designer on the Google Duo team. And for those that don't know, Google Duo is Google's not FaceTime, Google's video calling application that's not only made for Android devices, but it's for all devices, including laptops, tablets, the whole 9 yards. So it's a more ubiquitous and sort of like universal video calling app. But their main goal there was, connection. And they really focused on how do you make connections genuine and important for everybody in the world. Because for a lot of people, the fact is they want to feel like they're close to those family members and feel like they're close to those friends, and they don't have a way of doing that besides video calling. So their focus on is that connection, but also making sure it's high quality so that you can actually see and hear what's going on the other side of it. So my team was based out in Seattle, and I worked on my main task was on smart displays. So I was actually not as much on the mobile device, sort of like pillar of it all. I was more on dual implementations on other non-traditional devices, so laptops, and then this image right here was like the smart display I was working off of, and imagining how sort of like Duo could work on that and taking things. But basically, some of my takeaways from this entire experience was shoot. I have the person to shoot for the stars, which
Yeah.
means that, and this sort of like wraps into my entire like applying for internship is, you never know what is going to happen in your life or like what is possible unless you make that shot and at least attempt. And that sort of played out throughout my entire internship experience. So it was more of, if I don't ask or if I don't try, then I won't know if I can do this or if I'm even allowed to.
Right.
So during my internship, I was always the one that was asking, "Oh, can I do this?" Or, "Oh, can I sit in on this meeting and see what it's about?" Meetings that didn't like had to do nothing what I was doing, but I was just in the business of like learning as much as I could and just being in those spaces to sort of like absorb their knowledge and ask those questions.
Yeah.
Um,
Like sitting at
and
those
that,
places, even by sitting in the meetings, you get to absorb a lot, if not just in terms of the project, but in terms of how things are done in the industry, or like
yeah,
what your body, even soft skills, like how your body language is supposed to be, or like how you're supposed to explain things to people with different professions. How are you supposed to explain certain things to developers? How are you supposed to explain certain things to product managers and convey the same point but in different ways.
right. You're exactly right. Like I think there's so much learning that you do just by watching and
Right.
being in those spaces. I sort of think of people as like sponges, and even if we're not actively trying to learn, you're learning at every moment that there is. So just being in those spaces, I think did a lot more for me, especially in learning how to sort of ask those questions, learning how to, even down to the small stuff, sort of as, oh, I like the way they pitch this idea. I might incorporate that in my next sort of pitch that I have. or
Right.
like, yikes, I don't like the way they did that, or that didn't come across as well. Let me not, do that as well. So that was definitely the thing of me, always saying yes to myself, but also to like others around me. Because I was like, I only have 3 months here. Like I have to make the most out of it. And how can I do that easily? It's just by being as many places as I could and making sure I didn't have as much dead time. Um, just making sure I didn't have as much dead time. Like I made sure I scheduled my stuff out so I was still working, but I also made sure that any periods of my day where I was there was filled with something. So I was always somewhere doing something, eating something, whatever, whatever it was.
Keeping yourself active, basically. Making
You said
sure,
what?
keeping yourself active and making sure everyone
Hmm.
around you knows who you are.
Yep. Another good thing that I did was I scheduled lunch, like reoccurring lunches, with somebody on my team almost every day.
Yeah.
So I made sure made sure I never ate alone, but I also rotated out people that I ate lunch with.
Right.
Um,
These
and
are
that
some
was and that
hacks.
was
These are like some hacks which people should keep in mind when after they get their internship, like how to make an impression and make
yeah.
sure that your presence is felt.
Hmm. Like just you want to just feel like you're as part of this, as much as part of this company at the time you have there as you can. And I know if you're anything like me, like I like meeting people and I like talking to people. So like that was no problem for me, but it was more like scheduling that one-on-one time so I can make more like deeper connections with people. And a lot of these people that I met this summer, I still like talk to on like a weekly basis, which is like pretty dope.
Nice.
And I think that's just a testament to just being genuine when you are talking to people and not just always seeing it as, okay, I have to do this, or I feel like you're being forced to, but more like finding some enjoyment in like these are maybe like friends or people that I might know for a long time. So why not just treat them like you know they're anybody else? Like just because
Right.
they have this role or title, that I also would like to have. Doesn't mean that you still can't be like a genuine person with them. Um, and the next part was as always like have your mouth open and your like shoot questions out. Like don't just sit
Yeah.
there and be quiet. I think is something else that I took away because the first maybe like week or two I was really just like absorbing everything that was in there, and then when I first got the urge to like ask a question, I was like, oh, what do they care? Like I'm so much junior than the rest of the people out here. Like my opinion won't really matter. Sort of like all those self-defeating thoughts. And then I, kind of thought to myself, well, if they didn't value my opinion or didn't want it, they wouldn't have offered me this position.
Right.
And once I sort of reframed the thinking around that, it was just questions every day and like
Yeah.
questions, critique. It just like even like small things. I remember one time somebody was presenting a new flow for something, and one of the screens just felt like it was missing a transition, like such a small, like little thing. And I stepped up and I said, hey, I think there should be something in between, you know, this screen and this screen because like you're just jumping right now is what it seems. And they kind of brushed me off and didn't say anything. And then at the end of the meeting, I circled back and I was like, hey, I think there should be a transition here, and I had like drew it out like how it was when they showed it and how like I thought it could be, and presented it to them as more like an opportunity for making that user transition a lot seamlessly. And they were like, oh, thanks, I overlooked this, like when we get back to our desk, can you show me this more? And I said, great. So then I sat down with him and sort of like walked him through my thinking, and he ended up like implementing bits and pieces of it into his like flow there. But nothing would have happened if I just stayed silent,
Exactly.
and thought that my opinion isn't valued or my sort of like critique isn't valued, because like you are, and even if you're a junior or feel junior, like you still have your own eye and your own sort of perspective that you're
Right.
bringing to this that no one else in that room is going to have. So you're of course going to see things in different ways and pick up on it in different ways. which is extremely valuable to people because you have a fresh set of eyes, so utilize it.
Exactly. So can you tell us more about the project in terms of what were the parts, what phases were there in the project, and how did you go about from ideation to the final project?
Yeah, it. I had a couple of projects while I was there, because, like I said before, like I shot for the stars and just tried to take on as much as I could while I was there. So some range from smaller to bigger projects, but similar to how I approach a lot of my projects, um, it's just like at the beginning was asking a lot of questions and sort of amassing a wealth of information. And
Right.
Google has amazing UX researchers that do tons and tons of research, um, on like various topics. So I just, picked their brains for however long I could and asked like questions to certain ones. I worked on certain sort of problem sets, until I, sort of found my strategy within the data that I was pulling. Um,
So let's take the Duo project for example, right? Like you asked the questions, you proposed your flow or some transitions. Your manager was like, "Hey, why not? Like this is pretty good stuff. Why let's implement bits and pieces of it into the actual flow." And then what happened
mhm.
next?
uh, After that, it was after I got the okay that things were, going good, and this idea was, um, like viable. I took it upon myself to reach out to other people that were outside of my sort of like organization to figure out more of the mechanics of it, because the idea that I had was a little bit more technical than something they had done before, and I wanted to make sure it was feasible. So I reached out to the sort of team that was working on the device to like learn more about it, and learn more about that, its capabilities, like what it can do and how I can implement that. And I brought that back to my team and showed them like, okay, this product is about to come out, and these are all the things that it can do. And I showed them that as well. Like I took that on as a side project. Um, but that immediately like opened up their eyes, like, okay, all this untapped potential, that we're not, utilizing is out there with this product. And now like they have a better understanding. So it helped them sort of design or think about how they could be designing for this in a very different way.
Right.
Um, and that was all from asking those questions and then synthesizing that and sort of coming up with, a strategy. So like a strategy statement for, this is what Duo is now, this is what Duo could be with these opportunities, and here's a like strategy to do that all. Um, and a lot of that may be like non-traditional to how sort of designers sort of look at it. But my my grad program is in a traditional advertising school, which is kind of interesting. So like a lot of that work is like a lot of what like the strategists do is they sort of synthesize the information and present it as like a strategy or like a boat sort of like pushing this concept forward. And so I presented them with that and was like, we can take Duo from this to this on this device if we, follow this strategy and, have all ideas sort of like, um, cling from there.
Yeah.
And that was maybe about halfway through the summer that I did that. And they were just like, wow, like we didn't even think of all these opportunities that we could dive deep into. We want you to explore more of that. So I really stayed very high level with my projects, and drove them toward like implementation and like concept designs. But it was definitely more of like, here's what the future could be, and here's the, research, the backing, everything behind it, and here's some potential, implementations of that idea. Was
Right.
my main sort of like project, was more like, I would say product visioning, is what it lasts on, which is super dope because that's something that I enjoy, is thinking about the entire like brand ecosystem and not just smaller brand touch points, but, you know, how is every single experience with this service, so Duo, um, going to be beneficial and positive for the user that comes to it. And so it's more than just, okay, this is something that lives on a device, and it goes into, this is something that someone's interacting with at their busiest moment of the day. What impression are we giving back to them? Um, so more of that sort of thinking, like higher order design thinking, is what the space that I really enjoy being in, um, and then bringing that to life.
Nice. Is there any more
Um,
to the case study?
yeah, so I mean, the last thing to sort of like wrap it up was following that implementation. I also worked on that sort of like high level stuff. I worked on smaller stuff, so like screen sharing, and more features coming to like Duo Web. So that involved definitely more like meticulous design work and worrying about, okay, um, is this feature discoverable? And also like, how are we explaining this feature to make sure people understand it? Screen sharing is like complicated if you actually think about it. Like, we kind of laugh at it, but every time you share a screen, like, can you see it, sort of thing. So it's not a lot of feedback to let you know what you're doing, or also
Right.
like what's sharing and not being sharing. And that was interesting thinking about, what are concerns that can go in the screen sharing, and
Yeah.
how do we mitigate those concerns and sort of give people peace of mind. So that was another project I worked on, and I drove that from ideation all the way to actual implementation, but also like including, um, I think the main thing here with all of this is to sort of do what's asked of you. So like, yes, I had the project, which is in this example, one was screen sharing, um, but also do what they ask of you. So I implemented that, but also plus one. So, and my plus one is like, how can you take this further and leave them with something else to think about at its implementation? So
Right.
after I showed the developers and the designer I was working with, this is what this implementation is going to look like. Like, here are the red lines, here are all the slices, all that good stuff. But this is where it could be, and here we have opportunity to sort of do these other things and planning, even if it's just planting that seed in people's minds. I think it just shows them that you're not only thinking about the now, but you're thinking about the later, and you're very much like future proofing ideas, because problems will come and problems will go, but as long as you're staying ahead of them, you'll be able to mitigate them before it gets done.
That makes a lot of sense. That adding, not just doing what you're told, but adding your value and your bit of it as
Mm-hmm.
well, which shows how you
Mm-hmm.
also are as a designer. You're good at being a team player, but also you're good at adding your own originality to it.
Right, and I think that's definitely important. It's just like, every one of us is unique and has our own personality and our own lens.
Yeah.
So having the ability and freedom to add that, you might not always be able to get the chance to, but when you do, it can be very lucrative, and also just so like your passion for the space that you're working in,
Right.
I think.
Great. Also, Jeremy, I've noticed one thing when I was going through your portfolio website is that you've got an interest in AR and VR technology. So,
Mhm.
and a big question for beginners right now is also how to get started into AR and VR, what to learn, what tools can be used. So, can you explain that while sharing your virtual theater project?
Virtual theater was uh, basically a project that allowed me to combine my passion for movies with my passion for being with people. Um, and what I noticed is, um, growing up, I was always separated from my dad because he was in the military and he was overseas for a lot of my life, actually. But we found ways to sort of connect unconventionally. And this was like pre video calling, pre all that stuff. But we found ways to connect sort of unconventionally. And it
Right.
was by watching the same movies, and then talking about them while we was on the phone together, or like through letters or email, however I was communicating with him. And that was sort of like the way that I felt kind of close to my dad in those times. But thinking of that now, I think that there's a lot of more situations where people are distanced from the one that they love. So whether someone's in the hospital for a little bit, whether you're in a long distance relationship, whether, whatever the case may be, we're in a very global world, and we're separated by miles and miles and miles apart. And
Right.
so I thought to myself, how do you bring this sort of connection back to people and make them feel like they're together, even if they're not physically together in that moment? And that came to the idea of virtual theater for Atom Tickets. And Atom Tickets is sort of a competitor brand of Fandango. They're a movie ticketing service that focuses on streamlining the movie ticketing experience by making it you can do basically anything that you can do at the box office, you can do through the Atom app. And I really felt that they were, this would be something they would be super interested in doing, and also is valuable for their brand because they focus on connection, and they focus more on like movie going is not just a solo experience, it's an experience for like a lot of people to come together. It's a moment of connection. It's a moment of sort of a shared experience. And so
Right.
how do we share this experience with people? And I was like, that's great because, the idea I had was how do we bring people together and share this experience with them? And they had a similar idea to that. So I'm going to share the screen now. Um, That's all the stuff I just sort of mentioned. So what virtual theater is, it was a seasonal offering by Atom Tickets where they would be able to give a VR experience to anyone so that they can feel like they're close to the people that they want to be with. And this experience touches more than just a sort of like digital VR experience. It includes physical touch points as well to make it feel like you're actually at the movie more and more and more. Um, So these are sort of screens I designed, which was walking through the flow of setting up your box. And so in addition to the most important parts of the movie is not just going to see the movie, it's the snacks. And it's like, you know, the feeling that, I have a large popcorn, I have my large drink, like my best friends here, like all that stuff is part of this experience. And I wanted to bring that to a virtual setting.
It's about
So
it's about building a narrative before even going for the movie.
mhm.
Yeah.
So the subscription box sort of works as you can select your snacks that you want, and your snacks, your candy, your movie, and it sends boxes to you and also the other person you're going to see the movie with. And it includes those snacks and things, but it also includes little bits of the other person's snacks as well, because I know everyone likes to eat each other's snacks and like share candy. And I thought that would be an interesting way to sort of make it feel like you're getting a piece of that person with you within this box as well. Um, so each person receives a sort of care package, and then it's showtime, which is sort of visualization of what it can look like in the onboarding experience of it all. Um, but I wanted to take it a step further. So when I was thinking about the virtual private rooms, I really imagined like what those spaces could look like. And I went into character design and thought, okay, let's make this sort of robot-like character that can be the player, that can be the people's avatars. But then also, how do we make this space feel like it's actually a home? So I
Right.
went through different sort of implementations of designing what that space could look like. And I used Cinema 4D to do that. So pull some assets together, change up the lighting, and just like recreated living rooms, bedrooms, like really weird spaces, and thought about where do people view movies at, and how do I like. There was also an idea for like a car, like if you're viewing a movie like in a car, like what would that look like? So just really like zany ideas to really bring people together and give them sort of these fun touch points. Um, but I took it a step further. So you can see right here is the bedroom sort of aspect of it all. But I took it a step further, and I wanted to um, see how it actually can function in VR. Um, and so I used Unity, and I plugged in the different assets and actually recreated the room and include like a trailer for a movie. Used the VR headset and had people go inside of it, so I can get a sense of like the scale and the depth and everything. So these images are definitely before I made the Cinema 4D ones. Um, But what they gave me was a sense of scale, a sense of, where things needed to be, a sense of just like mood and general vibe. So I took that feedback from the people that I had go through this prototype VR experience, and then applied that to my more high fidelity mockups. So you can see how it sort of like informed spacing and where the controls would be and like what you can do and depth and whatnot. So it gave me a further insight into, change that I needed to make moving toward. And I took that, you can see from these screens, and put that in the Cinema 4D, and sort of rigged that up. So it
Right.
was definitely a very like non-conventional way of, I wouldn't even say non-conventional way. It's just more of, it was a different way of like testing and prototyping for me. So I had never worked with Unity before this. And so the learning curve was definitely kind of steep. But once you realize how to sort of make those assets and put them in, it was super easy to get it rigged up and have someone come into the headset and sort of get to be around this space. And it also allowed me to sell my idea quicker, because they were able to actually visualize and, be in the actual space I wanted them to be in too,
Right.
as well.
So,
Um,
so based on your learning approach, like just you mentioned, that you were not experienced with Unity, and so for someone who's not experienced in either Unity or Cinema 4D, would you like is your learning approach just hands down? Like, do you just go with opening the software and playing around, or do you prefer, or is your approach something different and more of like first follow some course?
Yeah, my approach is definitely download the tool, get into it, and start playing around.
Right.
I think you get to a point where you've learned so much tools that a lot of them are the same and
Yeah.
have the same sort of feature sets and just call it different things. So Cinema 4D was maybe the second time I had used like 3D software tool, but I understood the sort of like depth and lighting and other things like that. So it was definitely more of jumping in, learning around, playing around, and breaking things and seeing how I could fix it. Or even breaking things and being happy with how it was broken because it looked cool. So definitely my approach is more of getting to this tool as fast as you can
Yeah.
and sort of learn as you go. Because I mean, like YouTube University is free and
Yeah.
there's a bunch of videos out there, and like there's a bunch of resources to sort of help you get unstuck. I think it's just a lot of the parts of thinking that, oh, I can't do this, I can never do this. But
Yeah.
it their learning curve is so much smaller when you sort of like just jump in and have no direction and sort of like try to make your dreams come alive with it all.
Also, are there any guidelines that you followed in terms of AR design, AR and VR design? Like any
Yeah.
guidelines that you try to keep it in mind while designing that, okay, these are a set of guidelines you found on the internet and that following it.
Yeah, looking back at this project, I could have spent more time sort of learning the more sort of guidelines on VR and like how to use it in that space. I think a lot of it I learned by having people go into the VR experience. So one thing I noticed was like if the couch wasn't a certain height when people sat down, um, and so I use a chair and have people sit in the chair, but in VR they were sitting on the couch. But if those heights didn't match up, it almost made people have this out of body experience,
Right.
where they were like, okay, I'm not on the couch. I'm seeing myself not on the couch, but my body is physically sitting on something. This is weird, and it made them feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And that was something I didn't even think about until it had happened. So I think a lot of it for me was being able to prototype very quickly and getting people in the experience. I was able to learn more and sort of like create my own VR guidelines that I could then fact check with other people on the internet and be like, okay, this is a real thing. How do I overcome this? And for the chair instance, it was just, something simple as make them equal so that when they sit, it mirrors them actually sitting in real life. But definitely if I, when I have the time to go back and like look into this project, that I know the first thing I'm going to do is go into more like VR guidelines and sort of understand that space a little bit more. So I can start seeing, what are some other ways I can leverage this technology and what are some do's and don'ts. But like I said before, there's a bunch of free resources and Unity has like a ton. Let's talk about just VR development and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it went down to just learning by doing it and getting that prototype out there.
Also, was this a self project or was this like some freelance project? Like how, like, yeah.
So this was a project I had for school that
Okay.
spent off into a passion project.
Nice.
So I had the idea for it earlier, and I did some like the preliminary sort of like visioning and here are some low fidelity sketches. But then as I felt comfortable with learning more and more tools, I added them. I went back to this project and added them on. So like once I learned Unity, or once I was like, okay, I could get this, I could actually rig this up in VR, got the headset or whatever.
Yeah.
I said, great, now I'm gonna learn Unity and add that. And then I was like, okay, now I have all this learning from like when I did Unity, how do I make these rooms more realistic? Let's put them in the Cinema 4D. And so it was something that I took on as a more of a something that started as something to do for class that ended up being a passion project that I really like enjoyed
Yeah.
doing it. I think I did it over the span of maybe a semester or so, on and off again. So it was something I would just come back to and be like, oh shoot, like I think this was definitely I was in class and like had an idea for the character and like drew it out really quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and then went into cinema that night and made the character from when I had drawn it.
Right. Nice. So Jeremy, can you share your screen actually?
Yep.
Yeah. Can you also tell us about another interesting project which you worked on was for Hinge?
Mm-hmm.
So, can you tell us more about that? Like, was it for the company? Was it a passion project? And also explain more in depth about that project by explaining your case study.
Yeah. So this one was not. Um, it was not actually for the company. It was more of a problem that I saw out in the world and wanted to fix that up a little bit. Um, it was more from a problem that I had saw um, out in the world, or that me and my team had saw out in the world, and we wanted to tackle like solving it. And we solved it through the lens of Hinge. So it started off as me and my teammates were tasked with understanding how microaggressions show up within people. And for those of you who don't know, microaggressions are sort of invalidations that people say to you, especially it most likely happens with people of color. Um, but it's invalidations that people say that invalidate your experience as a person of color. So, for example, is oh, um, you're very pretty for a black girl, or like things like that that invalidate your entire experience, or just like a plethora of others. And so we wanted to understand, you know, what prompts people to say those things or like feel those things are okay, and what's sort of the more like reasoning behind it. And we boiled it down to it's a whole lot of communication that's involved in it. Um, and those microaggressions sort of stem for people having a lack of understanding of how to effectively communicate those things in a way that does not sort of rub anybody else the wrong way or invalidate their experience. So from taking that learning, we saw an opportunity in the dating space to sort of tackle microaggressions in dating, because as more and more dating apps come onto the rise, there's been a trend that there's been more like interracial couples as well, because dating apps have sort of broken down this barrier and allow people to meet whoever they really want to meet, and so they're able to form connections with basically anybody. So as more and more interracial couples sort of like happen and there's more interracial connection, there's more room for these sort of like invalidations to come to the forefront. So we wanted to create a solution that will help people combat um, those invalidations, but also provide them with tools and able to provide them with tools to enable to like get over that,
Right.
over that bump in their relationship and sort of navigate that rocky thing. So that led us to creating this new feature set within Hinge called Focus for Hinge, which is a feature-wide expansion of the Hinge app that sort of acts as a dating coach and helps you sort of learn tactics to date better and also communicate better with your partner.
Right.
Yeah. So Focus for Hinge, and you see the sort of title phase. The title was "Did you hang out with Braxton today?" So this feature was geared all around geolocation and sort of figuring out when people were together to ask them to reflect on their time together. And by reflecting on their time together, um, you're not only able to understand, how you actually felt about that person, but Hinge is also able to collect that data and then understand about you as a dater. So, the people that you like, what you don't like, what your quirks are, which that insight hasn't been developed by or hasn't been thought of by other dating apps. They kind of just want you to get as much matches as you can and they don't really focus on what do I do after this match. They leave that up into the hands of us. And a lot of us, if we are dating, um, it's just really practice learning how to date better. And none of us are experts, on that whole dating thing. So how do we help people through this dating experience and not just in finding connections?
Right.
Um, so how focus all works together is once you meet that person, you can reflect on your date with them. Um, and you go through this entire flow of sort of archiving your time spent with this person. And a big thing for us here when making this was to make this extremely intentional, but very like quick as well. So with a lot of these flows, you'll see different toggles, different sort of button actions and things like that. They keep you engaged in the reflection, but they don't necessarily ask you to, go really in depth about this entire experience. So by having this sort of ad lib style, you're able to get a very clear template about how your date went.
Right.
And also Hinge is able to take that and feel like, okay, what is this person as a dater? So at the end of the flow, it gives them a reflection, which basically is everything that they inputted comes to like this little story that you can read back and you can decide, okay, you know what, I actually did enjoy this person, and here's the reasons why I enjoyed this thing. Um, so it also provides validation and feedback because one of the biggest things within dating is you don't know if you're doing it right all the time. And sometimes you just need a little bit of, you know what, that's okay. On to
Right.
the next one, or that's okay. Like, what you're doing is fine. You just need that little bit of validation. And there was an opportunity there for Hinge to step in and really provide that support that people could give and then give them the option to hang out with that person again. So
Yeah.
in that moment, they're like, you know what? I made the decision that this is someone that I might want to keep around in my life for a little bit. Um, let's see how we can keep the sort of loop going around. Additional feature was adding in a dating log to keep track of all the dates that people go on, also showing them the colors of the dates so they can immediately see, okay, um, they can immediately tell like what type of time they had with that person. So green being good, red being not so great with that. So it's more about having people be more introspective about their dating experience and helping them through this dating process. Uh, So the really big part to focus is focus mode, which is once you and your partner have decided that y'all want to take it to the next level, there was opportunity here to not sort of delete a dating app, but use a dating app to help you like through this experience of connecting with somebody deeper. So by keeping some of the things the same, such as having the reflections and having the features such as good spots to date or like love language tests and stuff like that, we got rid of the rest of the functionality within Hinge, which is basically like getting likes and matches, and just had you focus on one person. And so by focusing on one person, you're more able to really deeply understand your connection with that. There was a study that was done that basically said that you're really only able to handle up to 5 or 6 potential matches at one time, and anything above that is overwhelming for people.
Yeah.
So we really took that into stride and made it so you only can focus on one person at a time, and you can really decide from there, is this a good fit for me or not? And the opposite side to that is that the Hinge algorithm can use that data even more for, if things do go south, um, they can use that to get you better matches later on because they know more about you, your dating habits, your likes, your dislikes, and they'll know more about like other users as well, so they can create more pairings. Because Hinge's mission is to be deleted, and in order to be effectively deleted, you have to make sure that a connection is long lasting. Um, so the other part of this is providing focus activities. So let's say an example is one person might feel like they were invalidated in an experience, and somebody else might feel like they had a good time. So Hinge will have a couple of activities that they will be able to serve up to people. They're all communication focused. So this example is play a silent game. It's like play a game, but you can only talk when it's your turn. And these sort of activities help people come to common terms about navigating these difficult relationships by giving them the space to do so. So one thing we never wanted to do was tell people the right thing to do. We just wanted to create more opportunity for people to do that
Creating more
thing.
engagement.
Yeah, creating more engagement, but also creating more opportunity within your date to have that time to actually communicate. Because a lot of times, you're doing a bunch of different other things. You might not be able to effectively set down time to be like, I felt a way about this, and I just want to talk to you about it. But
Right.
by playing these games and having these activities, it creates that opportunity for you to do that in that way. And so just like any of my other projects, the process really starts with just like learning as much as I could. Um, but the interesting part with this was that the best way for me to learn how Hinge worked was for me to use Hinge. Um, so I spent maybe like a little bit over almost a month on Hinge and just like getting like really immersing myself into this app and this app's culture.
Yeah.
And it was mind blowing just to go at it with that lens versus going at it as like being a single person wanting to like go on a date. I was way more perceptive to like how the app worked and like what are people's feelings on like learning like how are people using the app. So it gave me really deeper insights into the sort of it gave me really deeper insights into things I should consider when designing for this platform, and designing for this user base and these people. Like one thing was Hinge is very intentional about their movement in their app. So when it came to recreating this reflection piece, I had to be intentional as well. So I had to, think about
Did you
uh,
go on any dates and tell the date that your intention was just user research?
yeah, so I actually like went on a couple of dates and informed people straight up that I was like, listen, I'm a designer, I'm doing like this sort of thing. But I would still love to go out on a date and sort of like, grab drinks, do some other things, or just like learn, more
Yeah.
about people. I think that's just testament to me liking to connect with folks. um, so I think I went on like 3 or 4 and just sort of like talked to these people and like learned about what their likes and dislikes, like what they wish they could do more of, and also like what they needed out of a dating app. So I think this was one of my favorite bits of research because it was so hands on and it was so like, I don't know what prompted me to be like, let's go on some dates and see what could kind of happen. But I learned so much and could incorporate that into the design better. And I felt more, I would say, close to
Nice.
the problem and close to the implementation because I had lived it at that point.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's wireframes and testing and then prototyping that I use origami to prototype, and I learned origami and while I was at Google this summer.
Oh, nice.
And,
A lot of people
and
use
it,
Principle and Prototype.
you said
Majority
what?
majority of the designers I know use Principle and Prototype.
Yeah, I use Principal most often. Um, I think I definitely use Principal for this project. These some of the smaller ones, but for this slider, I wanted to use origami to get sort of it the way I want it to be.
Yeah,
So like if you can see in this background, so during the conversation I felt, and then there's a slider where you can select the adjective, and I needed it to be more like code like.
right,
So I was like, great, I don't want to code this, but I need something that's close to code. And origami is like the intermediate between it does it for you and you having to code it out. So I was able to have a little bit more control
right.
over how those options displayed and whatnot.
Yeah,
And that was something that I maybe learned in one session at Google. And it was like an hour. And then to make this prototype maybe took like 2 or 3 hours.
right.
Just like dedicated like learning and trying and figuring out. But it's part of just like my process of like learning anything is like getting it as fast as you can and testing and failing until you get to what you want. But yeah, so that was Hinge.
Great stuff, man. So, also, Jeremy, another thing that's really nice is that you don't just do design projects. Like, by your all the projects that you do, one are not really completely just design purpose. There's a higher purpose to it. Like, for example, one of your projects, Cultivate,
Hmm.
is regarding plant life, and it's an environment friendly project. And then one of your projects is for beard butter,
Hmm.
because like yeah, you take pride in your beard. And then
I
another
do. I do.
yeah, and another thing that one of the another project which is I don't know if it could be called design centric as well, is your podcast, the Just Us
Hmm.
podcast. So can you tell us
Hmm.
more about that?
Yeah. My approach to design is very much so I'm in the business of solving problems.
Right,
And the way that I solve those problems is through design and through solutions and through like implementation. So I don't see myself as someone that's restricted to a particular medium to solve those problems. Like from my portfolio, you'll see things like there will be websites, there'll be apps, there'll be other things. But the main thing is like these are problems out in the world and they need solving. Um, and some of them need solving in different ways that aren't, your apps, your digital stuff and things like that. And so the way I like to look at it is that I'm classically trained in like design and design thinking. Um, and the way that I look at that is through my lens of like UX design. So I'm able to apply those skills as UX designer to other problems that may not necessarily be that digital design sort of landscape. So for instance, like I can always wireframe, I can always do user research, I can usability testing, like the whole 9 yards, but it might not look the way um, the way things typically look. So, for example, for my project Cultivate, it was more of solving the problem within. It was about solving the problem of mental health within the Black community, and that problem stems from a lot of us not being able to talk about sort of mental health and not being able to communicate it, and that's because we haven't been, that's because mental health is a topic that takes so much more to understand. It's a lot to unpack. And when somebody else is not on the same page as you of that understanding, it makes those conversations hard. So
right.
when I looked at that problem through my UX lens, I was able to apply those same sort of like user research, personas, surveys, all that good stuff. But I realized that the problem couldn't just be solved with like an app. It needed a sort of like higher level thing to it, and that's where the plant life sort of came into it. And that's the same thing with my Beard project and everything else. I think that the beauty of UX is that you can apply those principles anywhere to any parts of your life to sort of figure out what's the best solution for the problem at hand. And that leads me to the Just Us podcast, which is a podcast I started with two of my other design friends who are also people of color. And, we saw a definite opportunity to use our voice to sort of highlight these things, to sort of provoke questions around design, and use our respective lenses to uh, just sort of shed light on the design world to a population of people that do not really have a relationship with it,
Yeah.
because it's not something that is readily accessible to a lot of people. And we saw this opportunity to use our platform, use our voices to give back to it. So that was us. Like we view our podcast as a UX project. Um, so we have weekly meetings where we do like we've done wireframes, we've done like user testing, and we do all this stuff. But we realize that the solution to this problem is a podcast, and why not use our voices to sort of actively solve this problem. So you can find our podcast on any of the podcast things out there. We have a new episode out every week. We actually just did a sprint um, last week, and we're like documenting our process and we're documenting our process from the sprint.
I'll be adding the
So
link to the podcast in the video description on YouTube.
yes, thank you. Yes, share the wealth. So yeah, we just wanted to get more people engaging with design and get more people like us engaging in design, and having the conversations like me and you are having right now. um we wanted to just raise light to that, and so we made the podcast, and we love doing it. They've been doing it since the beginning of the end of last year. So it's definitely been a journey, but I definitely think it shows the it 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 definitely acts as another testament to the way that I approach design thinking and designing.
Right. Nice. Great stuff, man. So what's next for Jeremy Stokes in terms of what are your future goals and what do you have in mind?
Yeah, short-term goals is graduate from grad school, which is happening next week. So that's definitely been on top of my mind right now. But I don't. I think what's next for me is definitely still learning. Even though I'm coming out of school and I'm starting my design career. Learning has always been a big part of my life. I always tell this story about how my grandma was a early childhood education teacher, and she was I spent a lot of my time with her. So essentially, I had to go to school twice every day because I would go to my regular school, and then I would come to my grandma's house, and she would have like her school set up for me. So I've definitely always been fascinated with the idea of learning and the idea of adding knowledge into me. Uh, so that's definitely going to be something that I continue to do, is continue to learn and continue to sort of build up my skill set. I never want to be someone that's like super specialized. I just want to be someone that is able to tackle any problem that is thrown his way, and
Right.
even if it's in his own sort of like Jeremy way, that problem's going to get solved and it's going to get done. So I have like a list of classes that I'm like going to sign up for after I graduate, which is weird because it's like, why would you want to take more like, classes on after you're done? But I don't know. I just like being a student.
What are some of the things that you want to learn?
Yeah, something else I want to learn is creative coding. It's something I've gotten into like the past couple of weeks, and I think it's pretty dope. Is essentially when you use um,
Yeah, I've
code.
seen a couple of things regarding it. Like when you use code to create designs on
Yeah.
and like you should check out the coding train for that. They've got some really good stuff. The
Oh,
coding
I'll
train
definitely
on YouTube.
I'll definitely have to check out that. But yeah, it's essentially like using code for the sake of like generation and art purposes. And I'm like, this is dope. I want to learn more of that.
Yeah.
Uh, So that's something I also want to learn. I'm still working on my sort of like beard stuff. So that's something I want to keep on doing, and I want to make that open source so that other people can make their own beard product that works just for their beard. Is always a vision I've seen for that. Uh, I'm still on the job search, which is, you know, part of the times, but the same thing with the Google internship is I'm just like riding the wave right now and just like trusting the process and letting it happen when it happens.
Right,
Um, but I think really my future goals and like where I see myself right now is I don't necessarily know, but I know that I want to keep on creating and solving problems. I think there's so many problems that are haven't been solved and that are going to come up, especially like after this pandemic is over. It's going to be so much stuff that people just need in their life and need
right.
sort of like assistance with. And I want to be at the forefront of like solving those problems and giving back to people and making sure that, people are able to create memories and moments that have an everlasting sort of impact on their lives. So that's a long way of saying that I don't necessarily know what's next, but I do know the direction that I want to do, and I do know sort of the problems that I want to solve and move forward. So I'm just gonna keep on running forward to like that next project and that next sort of solution, and keep on doing that. And I think I'll make a life out of that.
Nice. I feel the most risk taking you are as well as a person, the most risk taking a person is, the more they are closer towards that goal of creating stuff of their own and just
Hmm.
happy.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's all about like taking a risk, and that's definitely something that has influenced my design career so far. It's just like taking that risk and taking that leap of faith and just letting it pan out the way that it's going to pan out. Um, you know, if you're always preparing for something and you're always stopping yourself because you don't feel prepared, you're never going to do it.
Right.
Um, so why not just take the risk and why not just feel confident in what you are right now and so go for that thing? And
Yeah.
I think that's definitely the mantra that I'm going to keep on following is like everything's a risk. Stepping outside your door is a risk. So I'm gonna just take these risks that I can that are within my means and see how they work out for me and learn from them in the process and reflect and move on.
Absolutely, man. Like all the power to you. Jeremy, so summarizing your entire design journey and whatever we've discussed, if you had to, uh, if someone had to ask you what are your top three learnings from your entire experience, what would they be?
Right now, in this moment, if someone were to ask me my top three um, sort of learnings from this whole entire experience, the first one would be for my topic of taking a risk. Um, Definitely like take a risk, see how it pans out. You'll never know until you try. Um, Something else is like lean on each other. They always say design is a very collaborative sport, but I think you're only as strong as the people that you have around you. And that's also the people that you keep around you, like in all parts of your life. So I think just like staying more attuned to those people, as well as not being afraid of like venturing outside your box,
Right.
is definitely something else that I've learned throughout this experience. And then give back. I've in this short span of time, like learned so much,
Yeah.
and it's because people um, have helped when I reached out to them, or have helped along the way, or provided some sort of like insight or something, or I've sort of like done it myself. But I've always think it's important to share the wealth and share the knowledge. So just because I know it doesn't mean someone else can't know it. And
Yeah.
look for opportunities to, give back to the world. So like what you're doing with your podcast is an opportunity to, give back and highlight voices and help other people. And I think that's super dope. And I think we as people, we as designers, but also we as people should just do more of that, do more of sort of sharing that knowledge and giving back to others. So those are my three things: risk taking, um, building up that network, and giving back.
Nice. That's great, man. It's been great having you and knowing your story, Jeremy. This was the end of our interview. Like you've like all the power to you and can't see what you do ahead. And yeah, it was awesome.
Thank you. Same to you. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate this and can't wait to see how, the rest of your stuff turns out too. And how like you probably don't even know how much you're helping people that have questions about design or questions about anything sort of get to their next level. Like you're the testament to giving back right now. So kudos to you and everything, that you're doing. And likewise, if anything, I don't know if you're going to include like my contact information or like you can find me on LinkedIn. Like it's not that hard. But if there's any question anybody has or want to like virtually meet, like I'm super open to that. So just like connect with me on LinkedIn or find my email somewhere, hit me up on Instagram. I don't care. Just feel free to ask the questions. I'll respond.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to this episode and I hope you liked it. If you watched the entire video, drop a comment below saying always do more than what you're asked for to let us know. Subscribe to the Whiteboard.fm YouTube channel to check out other episodes and clips from this interview. This podcast is a part of the 10K Designers Network. You can check out other projects on 10kdesigners.com.